Canine dog sprints through backyard and grabs toddler, what was falling from the sky, left her mother screaming. What happened next will shock you beyond belief. The story you are about to listen to proves that heroes come in all forms, and sometimes salvation arrives on 4 legs. If this story moves you, please like, share, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet neighborhood of Cedar Hills, where nothing ever seemed to happen. 5-year-old Maya sat cross-legged in her wooden playhouse, carefully arranging her collection of stuffed animals for what she called their important meeting. Her small fingers moved with the seriousness only a child could bring to such matters, positioning each toy just right on the miniature table. "Now, Mr. Bear, you need to listen to Princess Bunny," she whispered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had clearly done this many times before. "She has something very important to say about the tea party rules." 30 feet away, her mother Sarah knelt in the garden, pulling weeds from between the tomato plants. The rhythmic sound of her gardening tools scraping against soil mixed with Maya's quiet chatter, creating the kind of peaceful soundtrack that made suburban afternoons feel safe and predictable. Sarah paused occasionally to wipe sweat from her forehead, glancing over at her daughter with the satisfied smile of a mother watching her child's imagination run wild. Under the wooden porch, an aging German shepherd named Atlas lay sprawled in the cool shade, his thick coat providing relief from the summer heat. At 8 years old, Atlas had earned his rest. His working days with the county sheriff's department were behind him now, replaced by lazy afternoons and the simple job of being Maya's unofficial guardian. His dark eyes followed Sarah's movements with the casual interest of a dog who had learned to read his family's routines perfectly. The neighborhood hummed with typical suburban sounds. Mrs. Chen next door was watering her prize-winning roses, the spray creating tiny rainbows in the late afternoon light. 2 houses down, teenagers were shooting basketball in their driveway, their laughter echoing off garage doors and fence lines. It was the kind of day that felt like it could stretch on forever, wrapped in the comfortable predictability of routine. Maya had moved on to serving invisible tea to her stuffed guests when she noticed the sky beginning to change. Dark clouds were gathering with unusual speed, rolling in from the west, like someone had drawn a curtain across the sun. She looked up through the playhouse window, her small face creased with curiosity. "Mommy, why are the clouds moving so fast?" she called out. But Sarah was focused on a particularly stubborn dandelion and didn't hear her daughter's question. Atlas, however, had noticed something else entirely. His head lifted from his paws, ears perked forward. In a way Sarah would have recognized as his alert position from his police days. But she was still bent over her garden work, unaware that her retired K9 partner had suddenly shifted from relaxed family pet to something much more focused. The wind began to pick up, rustling the leaves of the old oak tree that dominated their backyard. Maya's lightweight tea set rattled slightly on the playhouse table, and she reached out to steady her favorite teacup, the pink one with tiny flowers that her grandmother had given her last Christmas. The approaching storm seemed to be moving faster than normal weather patterns, but in a 5-year-old's world, such observations were simply part of life's interesting mysteries. Sarah finally looked up from her gardening when a particularly strong gust of wind nearly knocked over her watering can. She squinted at the darkening sky, mentally calculating whether she had enough time to finish her work before the rain started. Living in Texas meant you learned to read the weather quickly, and these clouds had the look of something that could turn serious fast. "Maya, honey, we might need to head inside soon," she called out, beginning to gather her tools. "Looks like we're going to get some rain." But Atlas was no longer just alert. He was standing now, his entire body rigid with a tension that Sarah had seen only during his most serious police work. His nose was raised to the air, testing scents that humans couldn't detect, his tail held stiff and high. Something was wrong, very wrong, though he couldn't yet identify the exact threat. Maya was in the middle of explaining to Mr. Bear why he couldn't have 2 pieces of pretend cake when a sound reached her ears. Not thunder, which she was expecting, but something else. A mechanical humming that seemed to be getting closer, though she couldn't see where it was coming from. She pressed her face against the playhouse window, looking up at the increasingly dark sky. "Do you hear that, Princess Bunny?" she whispered to her favorite stuffed rabbit. "It sounds like Daddy's drone, but bigger." Sarah had moved to the porch to stack her gardening supplies when she noticed Atlas's behavior. The dog was now pacing in tight circles, his head turning constantly between Maya's playhouse and the sky above. She had seen this behavior only a handful of times during their partnership, and it always meant immediate danger was approaching. Her heart began to race with a mother's intuition that something was terribly wrong. "Atlas, what is it?" she asked, her voice carrying the authoritative tone she had used during their law enforcement days. But Atlas wasn't responding to commands anymore. He was operating on pure instinct now. Every muscle in his body coiled for action. The mechanical humming grew louder, though it was still masked by the increasing wind. Maya abandoned her tea party and moved to the playhouse door, craning her neck to see what was making the strange noise. The sky had turned an ominous shade of gray-green that experienced storm watchers knew meant serious weather was coming, but this sound wasn't thunder or wind. Without warning, Atlas exploded into motion. His powerful legs propelled him across the yard in a sprint that Sarah had never seen from him. Not even during his most intense police pursuits. He moved with the focused intensity of a working dog responding to a critical threat, his training overriding years of comfortable retirement. Sarah watched in confusion and growing alarm as her gentle family pet transformed back into the elite K-9 officer he had once been. "Atlas, stop!" she shouted, but he was already at Maya's playhouse, and what happened next would replay in Sarah's nightmares for months to come. The big German shepherd didn't slow down. Instead, he burst through the playhouse door with enough force to rattle the entire structure. Maya, startled by the sudden invasion, barely had time to gasp before Atlas grabbed the back of her shirt with his teeth, not biting, but gripping with the trained precision of a dog who had been taught to move people to safety. "Atlas, no!" Sarah screamed, running toward the playhouse as fast as her legs could carry her. But Atlas was already dragging Maya backward, away from the windows, his powerful neck muscles pulling her small body toward the back corner of the playhouse where the wooden walls were thickest. Maya, confused and frightened, began to cry. "Mommy, Atlas is being mean to me." But Atlas wasn't being mean. He was being smart. With Maya secured in the safest spot he could find, he positioned his own body between her and the playhouse windows, his massive frame creating a living shield. His ears were flat against his head, and a low, continuous growl rumbled in his chest as he stared at something Sarah couldn't yet see. That's when the sky exploded. The mechanical humming suddenly became a screaming whine of failing engines and twisted metal. Sarah looked up just in time to see a dark object plummeting from the storm clouds, spinning out of control as it fell toward their yard. It wasn't natural debris from the storm. It was something man-made, something that had no business being in the air above her neighborhood, much less falling toward her daughter's play area. The object struck the ground with a sickening crash, sending up a spray of dirt and grass just 10 feet from where the playhouse stood. The impact shattered the playhouse windows, sending glass fragments flying through the air, where Maya had been sitting only seconds before. If Atlas hadn't moved her, if he hadn't somehow sensed the danger before it became visible, those glass shards would have found their target. Sarah's scream pierced the air, raw and primal, the sound of a mother who had just watched death miss her child by mere seconds. She ran toward the playhouse, her gardening gloves still on her hands, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it over the sound of settling debris. Maya, are you okay?" She reached the playhouse and found her daughter huddled in the back corner, still crying but unharmed, with Atlas maintaining his protective position over her small body. Glass crunched under Sarah's knees as she crawled into the playhouse to reach her daughter, her hands shaking as she checked Maya for injuries. "I'm okay, Mommy," Maya hiccuped through her tears. "But Atlas scared me. Why did he grab my shirt?" Sarah gathered her daughter into her arms, holding her tight while looking over at Atlas with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. The dog's intelligent brown eyes met hers, and she saw in them the same steady competence that had made him such an exceptional police partner. Somehow, he had known. Somehow, he had sensed what was coming and acted to save Maya's life. "He wasn't being mean, sweetheart," Sarah whispered into Maya's hair. "He was being a hero." Only then did she turn her attention to the object that had fallen from the sky. What she saw made her blood run cold. This wasn't storm debris or a broken tree branch. This was a piece of technology, twisted and partially melted, but still clearly recognizable as some kind of surveillance equipment. Wires and circuit boards were scattered around a central hub that looked expensive and sophisticated, the kind of equipment that belonged to government agencies or very wealthy private entities. But what kind of surveillance device fell out of storms? And why had it been flying over her backyard, over her daughter's play area? Sarah fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers, still holding Maya close with her free arm. Atlas remained on alert, his nose testing the air around the crashed device, his body language telling her that the danger might not be over. As she dialed 911, one thought kept circling through her mind. If Atlas hadn't acted when he did, if he hadn't somehow sensed the threat before it became visible, she would be calling for an ambulance instead of the police. 911, what's your emergency? Something fell out of the sky into my backyard, Sarah said, her voice shaky but clear. It almost hit my daughter. I think it might be some kind of drone or surveillance equipment. The dispatcher's voice became more focused. Are you and your daughter injured, ma'am? No, we're okay. Our dog moved her out of the way just before it hit. Sarah looked down at Atlas, who was still positioned protectively near Maya. I need someone to come look at this thing. It doesn't look like anything that should be flying over a residential neighborhood. As she gave the dispatcher her address, Sarah noticed something else that made her stomach twist with unease. The device hadn't just fallen randomly. It had been heading directly for Maya's playhouse, as if it had been programmed to target that specific location. The trajectory of the crash site, the angle of impact, everything suggested this hadn't been an accident or equipment malfunction. Someone had been watching her daughter. Someone had been using sophisticated surveillance equipment to monitor a 5-year-old child playing in her own backyard. And if not for Atlas's inexplicable instincts, that same someone might have succeeded in whatever they had been planning. The storm clouds were beginning to break up, allowing shafts of sunlight to illuminate the crash site. Sarah could see more details now. Serial numbers on some of the components, what looked like camera equipment, and most disturbing of all, what appeared to be a small storage device that might contain recorded footage. Maya had stopped crying and was now curious about the strange object in their yard, but Sarah held her back. Don't touch anything, honey. The police are coming to look at it. Atlas finally relaxed his guard position and came to sit beside them, accepting Maya's grateful hug around his neck. His job was done for now, but Sarah could see he was still alert, still watching the sky and the surrounding neighborhood, with the vigilance of a dog who knew that threats could come from anywhere. The afternoon that had started so peacefully had become something else entirely, the beginning of a mystery that would challenge everything Sarah thought she knew about the safety of her quiet neighborhood, and the first chapter of a story that would prove Atlas's police instincts were far from retired. Within minutes, the quiet suburban street was transformed into something resembling a crime scene. 2 patrol cars arrived first, their red and blue lights painting the neighborhood in alternating colors that drew curious neighbors from their homes. Sarah watched from her porch as Officer Martinez stepped out of the lead vehicle, his hand instinctively resting on his radio as he surveyed the crash site. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Martinez," he said, approaching with the careful steps of someone who had learned not to assume anything was safe. "You called about something falling from the sky?" Sarah pointed toward the twisted metal and plastic scattered across her yard. "It almost hit my daughter. Our dog somehow knew it was coming and moved her out of the way just before it crashed." Officer Martinez knelt beside the debris, his flashlight illuminating components that clearly didn't belong to any civilian equipment. His expression grew more serious as he examined the sophisticated electronics, the miniature cameras, and what appeared to be data storage devices. After a few moments, he stood and walked back to his patrol car, speaking quietly into his radio. Maya, still shaken but increasingly curious, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why are there so many police cars coming?" Sarah looked up to see that Martinez had been joined by 2 more officers, and another vehicle was turning onto their street. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I think that thing that fell might be more important than we thought." Atlas remained close to Maya's side, his alert posture telling Sarah that he still sensed something wrong about the situation. She had learned to trust his instincts during their years working together, and right now, those instincts were screaming that this was far from over. The 3rd officer to arrive was Sergeant Williams, a veteran with 25 years on the force whose weathered face had seen enough to recognize serious trouble when it appeared in suburban backyards. He approached the debris with the careful attention of someone who understood that evidence could tell stories if you knew how to read it. "Martinez, what do we have here?" Williams asked, pulling on latex gloves as he surveyed the crash site. "Unknown aircraft debris, Sarge. But look at this stuff. Thermal imaging equipment, high-resolution cameras, encrypted data storage. This isn't some hobbyist's toy drone." Williams crouched beside the largest piece of wreckage, his flashlight revealing serial numbers and manufacturer markings that made his jaw tighten. "Sarah, right?" he said, looking up at her. "I need to ask you some questions. How long have you lived here?" 3 years, Sarah replied, unconsciously pulling Maya closer to her side. "We moved here when Maya was 2. It's always been a quiet neighborhood. Have you noticed anything unusual recently? Strange vehicles, people you don't recognize, anything that seemed out of place?" Sarah started to shake her head, then paused. "Actually, yes. Last week Maya mentioned seeing a silver truck in the alley behind our house. She said the man was fixing the road, but I checked and there wasn't any construction scheduled for our area." Williams and Martinez exchanged a look that made Sarah's stomach drop. "Can you describe this truck in more detail?" Maya saw it, not me. She said it was silver, and the man would sit in it for a while, then drive away slowly. Williams called Maya over gently. "Hey there, sweetheart. Can you tell me about the truck you saw? You're not in trouble. You might actually be helping us solve a puzzle." Maya looked at her mother for reassurance, then spoke in the clear, matter-of-fact way children did when adults finally asked them about something they'd been trying to explain. "It was shiny like a mirror, and it made a funny noise when it drove away. The man inside had dark hair, and he always wore sunglasses, even when it was cloudy." "How many times did you see this truck?" "Lots of times, maybe 5 or 6. He would park right there." Maya pointed toward the alley that ran behind their property line. "And he would sit there for a really long time. I thought he was fixing something, but I never saw him get out of the truck." Williams made notes in his pad, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Sarah, I need to make some calls. This is looking like it might be more than just an equipment malfunction." As if summoned by his words, another vehicle arrived. This one an unmarked sedan that Sarah immediately recognized as federal. She had worked with enough agencies during her time with Atlas to know when the scope of an investigation was about to expand dramatically. The man who stepped out of the sedan was tall and lean, with the kind of controlled movements that suggested military or federal law enforcement training. He approached Williams with the easy familiarity of colleagues who had worked together before. "Sergeant Williams, I'm Agent Cooper, FBI. We got a call about some unusual aircraft debris." "That's putting it mildly," Williams replied, gesturing toward the crash site. "Take a look at this equipment and tell me what you think." Agent Cooper spent several minutes examining the wreckage, his trained eye picking out details that the local officers had missed. When he finally stood, his expression was grim. "This is military-grade surveillance equipment, heavily modified for civilian use. The thermal imaging system alone costs more than most people make in a year." Sarah felt her world shifting underneath her feet. "Are you saying someone has been watching my daughter with military equipment?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Cooper replied. "And based on the modification patterns I'm seeing here, this wasn't some lone stalker with too much money. This is the kind of equipment used by organized groups for very specific purposes." Maya, who had been quietly playing with Atlas while the adults talked, suddenly looked up. "Agent Cooper, does your job make you help find bad people?" "That's right, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" "Because the man in the silver truck took pictures of me playing. I saw the flash sometimes when I was in my playhouse, but I thought it was lightning." The adults fell silent. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, her hands trembling as she tried to keep her voice calm. "Maya, honey, when did you see the flash?" "Lots of times, usually when I was having tea parties with my stuffed animals. The flash would come from the alley, but I never saw any rain afterwards, so I knew it wasn't really lightning." Agent Cooper squatted down to Maya's eye level, his voice gentle but urgent. "Maya, this is very important. Did you ever try to wave at the man in the truck?" "Uh-huh. Once I waved, and he drove away really fast. But the next day he came back." Sarah stood abruptly, her face pale. "How long has this been going on? How long has someone been photographing my daughter without my knowledge?" Agent Cooper's jaw tightened. "Based on what Maya is telling us, potentially weeks or even months. This kind of systematic surveillance is typically used for one of two purposes: either gathering intelligence for a planned abduction or documenting potential targets for human trafficking operations. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She staggered backward, and Officer Martinez stepped forward to steady her. Human trafficking? My daughter? It's a possibility we have to consider, Cooper said carefully. But the good news is that Atlas disrupted whatever was planned. That drone was carrying active surveillance equipment, which means someone was watching Maya in real time when it crashed. They know their operation has been compromised. Atlas, as if sensing the gravity of the conversation, moved closer to Maya and sat down beside her in the protective posture Sarah remembered from their most dangerous police calls. His brown eyes were alert and focused, constantly scanning the street and surrounding houses for threats. Agent Cooper pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "I'm requesting a full forensic team and a tactical support unit," he told Williams. "If there's an active trafficking operation targeting children in this neighborhood, we need to move fast before they relocate or, worse, accelerate their timeline." Sarah's mind was reeling. 3 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether to finish her gardening before it rained. Now she was being told that her daughter had been the target of sophisticated surveillance by what might be an organized human trafficking ring. The suburban safety she had taken for granted felt like a cruel illusion. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "First, we secure this scene and extract every piece of data we can from that equipment," Cooper replied. "Then we're going to have a very serious conversation about Maya's safety and what precautions we need to take going forward." As if to underscore his point, Cooper's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at the screen, and his expression became even more serious. "Williams, I need to speak with you privately." The two men walked several steps away, their voices low, but their body language tense. Sarah couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see Cooper showing Williams something on his phone screen that made the sergeant's face go white. Maya, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around her, had found a stick and was drawing patterns in the dirt near Atlas's feet. "Look, Atlas, I'm drawing a map of where all my stuffed animals live. This is where Mr. Bear has his house, and this is where Princess Bunny grows her carrots." Atlas watched Maya's stick movements with the same intensity he had once brought to tracking suspects, as if her innocent play was the most important thing in the world. Sarah realized that, in his mind, it probably was. Cooper returned to where Sarah was standing, his phone still in his hand. "Sarah, I just received information that makes the situation more urgent than we initially thought. There have been similar surveillance operations targeting children in 3 other states over the past 6 months. In 2 of those cases, the children disappeared within 72 hours of the surveillance equipment being deployed." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Sarah grabbed onto the porch railing to steady herself. "Are you telling me that Maya could have been kidnapped?" "I'm telling you that, based on the evidence we're seeing, Maya was likely being prepared for abduction. The asystematic surveillance, the real-time monitoring, the sophisticated equipment, these are all markers of a professional operation with significant resources behind it. But why Maya? Why my daughter?" Agent Cooper's expression was gentle but brutally honest. Children like Maya fit a specific profile that traffickers look for: young, attractive, from stable middle-class families in quiet neighborhoods, where parents feel safe letting their children play outside unsupervised. The isolation of suburban backyards makes surveillance easier, and the predictable routines make planning simpler. Sarah felt sick. Everything that had made her feel like a good mother, the safe neighborhood, the secured backyard where Maya could play freely, the routine that gave their lives structure, had actually made her daughter a target. "There's something else," Cooper continued. "The equipment we're looking at here isn't something you can buy online. This is military-grade surveillance technology that requires specialized knowledge to operate and modify. We're not dealing with opportunistic criminals. This is an organized network with significant resources and professional expertise." Officer Martinez had been processing the scene while they talked, photographing evidence and securing the debris. Now he approached with an evidence bag containing what looked like a small memory card. "Agent Cooper, you need to see this. I found it in what's left of the main processing unit." Cooper examined the memory card through the clear plastic of the evidence bag. "This could contain weeks or months of surveillance footage. We need to get this to our cyber crimes unit immediately." How long before you know what's on it? Sarah asked. A few hours, maybe less if we get lucky. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. Until we know the full scope of this operation, Maya is still at risk. The people behind this know their surveillance drone crashed, but they don't know how much we've learned from it. They might decide to cut their losses and disappear, or they might try to accelerate their timeline and act before we can stop them. Maya looked up from her dirt drawings, her young face curious about all the serious adult conversation happening around her. Mommy, are we in trouble? Sarah knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close. No, sweetheart, we're not in trouble. But these nice police officers are going to help make sure we stay extra safe, okay? Is Atlas going to help too? Sarah looked at the aging German shepherd, who had positioned himself so that he could watch both Maya and the street simultaneously. Yes, honey, Atlas is definitely going to help. Agent Cooper was already coordinating with his team, but he paused to address Sarah directly. I'm going to recommend that you and Maya stay somewhere else tonight, somewhere the surveillance team wouldn't know to look for you. Do you have family or friends you could stay with? My sister lives across town. But what about our house? What about Atlas? We'll maintain a presence here, and Atlas can come with you if that makes you more comfortable. In fact, given what happened today, I'd prefer he stay close to Maya. As if he understood the conversation, Atlas stood and moved to Maya's side, his solid presence a reminder that some protections couldn't be bought or taught. They came from the heart. The evening light was beginning to fade, casting longer shadows across the yard, where Maya's playhouse stood with its shattered windows. Looking at it now, Sarah could see how exposed it had been, how easy it would have been for someone with the right equipment to monitor her daughter's every movement. The innocence of the afternoon seemed like a lifetime ago, but as she watched Maya absently pet Atlas while talking to Agent Cooper about her stuffed animals, Sarah realized that innocence wasn't entirely lost. It had been protected by an old dog's instincts and a moment of perfect timing that might have saved her daughter's life. But she also knew that this was far from over. Somewhere out there, people who had been planning to take Maya were regrouping, and until they were caught, her family would never truly be safe again. What would you do if you discovered your child had been under surveillance for months without your knowledge? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The safe house Agent Cooper had arranged turned out to be Sarah's sister, Jennifer's 2-bedroom apartment across town. But safety felt like a foreign concept now. As Sarah tucked Maya into the unfamiliar bed, her daughter's small voice carried a weight that no 5-year-old should have to bear. Mommy, why can't we go home tonight? Sarah smoothed Maya's hair, searching for words that would be honest without being terrifying. Remember how Atlas knew something dangerous was going to happen today? Well, the police officers want to make sure nothing else dangerous happens, so we're having a sleepover with Aunt Jennifer. Maya considered this with the serious expression she wore when processing important information. Is Atlas worried about the bad people? Before Sarah could answer, Atlas himself provided the response. The aging German shepherd had positioned himself directly beside Maya's bed, his body oriented toward the apartment's main entrance. Even in this new environment, his protective instincts remained sharp and focused. I think Atlas is being extra careful, Sarah said softly, just like how he was careful today when he moved you away from the playhouse. He's a good dog, Maya murmured, her small hand reaching down to pat Atlas's head. He knows things before they happen. Sarah watched her daughter drift off to sleep, but rest wouldn't come easily for her. Every creak of the old apartment building, every car passing on the street below, every shadow moving past the window sent her heart racing. Jennifer had tried to make conversation earlier, but the weight of what they'd learned made normal family chatter feel impossible. At 2:17 a.m., Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Cooper. Need to talk. Important development. Are you awake? Sarah slipped out of the bedroom quietly, leaving Atlas on guard duty beside Maya's bed. She found Jennifer in the kitchen, also unable to sleep, nursing a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold hours ago. Cooper needs to talk, Sarah whispered. Something's happened. Jennifer nodded toward the living room. Take the call out there. I'll listen for Maya. Agent Cooper's voice was tense when he answered on the first ring. Sarah, we've been analyzing the data from that memory card, and what we found is worse than we initially thought. Sarah's stomach dropped. How much worse? The surveillance of Maya wasn't random. The footage shows systematic documentation of her daily routines going back 8 weeks. Whoever was behind this knew exactly when Maya played outside, which toys she preferred, even which stuffed animals she talked to most often during her tea parties. The violation felt complete and sickening. 8 weeks? They've been watching her for 8 weeks? That's not the worst part. The surveillance data includes audio recordings. They have hours of Maya's voice, her laughter, even recordings of her singing to her stuffed animals. Sarah, this level of detailed preparation suggests they weren't just planning an opportunistic kidnapping. They were creating a psychological profile. Sarah gripped the phone tighter. What does that mean? It means they were learning how to manipulate her, how to gain her trust, what would make her comfortable with strangers. The audio recordings would allow them to train someone to approach Maya using familiar phrases, references to her toys, even mimicking speech patterns she would find comforting. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. She slumped against Jennifer's kitchen counter, her legs suddenly unsteady. They were going to use her own words against her. Sarah, there's more. The metadata on these files shows they were being uploaded to a secure server in real time. This wasn't just local surveillance. The footage and audio were being shared with other people, possibly in other locations. Other people? We're looking at what appears to be a sophisticated network. The server logs show access from IP addresses in 5 different states, and the data was being tagged with reference numbers that suggest Maya wasn't their only target. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process information that felt like it belonged in a nightmare rather than her real life. How many other children? We're still analyzing the data, but preliminary indications suggest at least 12 other children across 4 states. Sarah, we're not just dealing with a local threat anymore. We're looking at what might be a multi-state human trafficking operation, specifically targeting young children from middle-class suburban families. The scope of it was overwhelming. What had started as a strange afternoon in her backyard had become evidence of something much larger and more terrifying than she could have imagined. Agent Cooper, I need to ask you something directly. If Atlas hadn't acted when he did today, would Maya be missing right now? There was a long pause before Cooper answered. Based on the data we're seeing and the timing of the surveillance, I believe today was their planned extraction date. The real-time monitoring suggests they were waiting for the optimal moment when Maya was alone and vulnerable in her playhouse. Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. The random drone crash that had seemed like a freak accident was actually the moment her daughter's life had been saved by circumstances that still felt impossible to explain. How did Atlas know? She whispered. How did he sense something that sophisticated surveillance equipment couldn't detect? I don't have an answer for that, Cooper admitted. But I've worked with K-9 units for 15 years, and I've seen dogs detect threats that our best technology missed. Sometimes instinct and training combine in ways that science can't fully explain. Through the apartment's thin walls, Sarah could hear Maya talking in her sleep, probably having a conversation with her stuffed animals, even in dreams. Atlas would be listening too, his protective instincts never fully at rest. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now we use what we've learned to shut down this network before they can relocate or target other children. But Sarah, I need you to understand that Maya is still in danger until we have all the players in custody. The people behind this know their operation has been compromised, but they don't know how much evidence we've recovered. Are you saying they might still try to take her? I'm saying they might view her as a loose end that needs to be eliminated. These aren't petty criminals. They're part of an organization that has invested significant time, money, and resources in this operation. They're not going to walk away quietly. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air coming through Jennifer's windows. What kind of protection can you provide? We're arranging for a safe house with proper security, and I'm recommending that Atlas stays with Maya at all times. His instincts saved her life once. I'm not willing to bet they won't be needed again. After ending the call, Sarah returned to the bedroom, where Maya slept peacefully, unaware that her innocent tea parties and conversations with stuffed animals had been recorded and analyzed by people who saw her as nothing more than a commodity. Atlas raised his head as she entered, his dark eyes meeting hers with an understanding that felt almost human. "Good boy," she whispered, kneeling beside him to scratch behind his ears. "You saved her, didn't you? You somehow knew what was coming." Atlas leaned into her touch, his warm presence a reminder that not Everything in the world was cold and calculating. Some things, loyalty, protection, love, still operated on instincts older and more reliable than any technology. The next morning brought news that made the situation even more complex. Agent Cooper arrived at Jennifer's apartment with a grim expression and a folder full of documents that would change everything Sarah thought she knew about her quiet suburban neighborhood. "We've identified the owner of the silver truck Maya saw," he said, settling into Jennifer's living room chair while Maya played with her stuffed animals in the bedroom, Atlas keeping his usual vigilant watch. "Who is it?" "A man named Marcus Webb, but that's almost certainly an alias. What's interesting is that Webb has been renting a house 3 blocks from your neighborhood for the past 4 months, paying cash for a 6-month lease." Sarah felt her blood turn cold. "He's been living that close to us?" "It gets worse. The rental house has been modified with sophisticated communications equipment, high-end computers, and what appears to be a coordination center for managing multiple surveillance operations. Sarah, your neighborhood wasn't randomly chosen. It was specifically selected and infiltrated." Jennifer, who had been listening from the kitchen, joined them in the living room. "Are you saying this man moved to our area specifically to target Maya?" "Not just Maya. We found evidence that Webb's operation was monitoring at least 6 other children in your immediate area. Maya was the primary target, but they were gathering intelligence on multiple potential victims." The violation felt complete. The safe, family-friendly neighborhood Sarah had chosen specifically to protect her daughter had been turned into a hunting ground by people who understood exactly how suburban parents thought and what would make them feel secure. "Why Maya as the primary target?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Cooper opened his folder and pulled out a photograph that made Sarah's stomach lurch. It was Maya playing in her backyard, taken with telephoto equipment from what must have been Webb's rental house. But it wasn't just the invasion of privacy that was disturbing. It was the clinical notation written on the back of the photo. "Subject exhibits optimal behavioral patterns for conditioning, responsive to authority figures, comfortable with strangers who demonstrate knowledge of personal interests, minimal defensive behaviors, high-value placement potential." Sarah stared at the photograph and the cold, analytical description of her daughter's personality. "High-value placement potential?" "It's trafficking terminology," Cooper explained gently. "They were evaluating Maya's marketability to potential buyers based on her personality traits and physical characteristics." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Her daughter's natural friendliness, her trusting nature, her innocent willingness to talk to adults about her toys and games, all the qualities that made Maya such a joy to be around, had been cataloged as selling points by people who trafficked in children. "There's something else," Cooper continued. "The communications equipment in Webb's house shows he was receiving instructions from a central command structure. This wasn't a lone predator. Maya was being targeted by an organized network with resources, planning, and what appears to be significant experience in this kind of operation." Maya's voice drifted from the bedroom, talking to Atlas about which stuffed animal should be the guest of honor at today's tea party. The normalcy of her chatter contrasted sharply with the clinical brutality of the trafficking documents spread across Jennifer's coffee table. "Agent Cooper," Jennifer said quietly, "how close did they come to taking her?" Cooper's expression was grave. "Based on the timeline we've reconstructed, we believe they were planning to move within the next 48 to 72 hours. The real-time surveillance was likely their final preparation phase, confirming that Maya's routines hadn't changed, and that the extraction plan would proceed as designed." Sarah felt dizzy. What was their plan? The surveillance notes indicate they were going to approach Maya while she was playing alone in her backyard, using knowledge of her toys and routines to gain her trust quickly. They had detailed scripts based on her recorded conversations, designed to make Maya comfortable with going with them voluntarily. "Scripts?" Cooper pulled out another document. "They knew Maya's favorite stuffed animal is Princess Bunny. They knew she likes to have tea parties at 3:30 in the afternoon. They knew she sings a specific song when she's arranging her toys. All of this information was going to be used to convince Maya that whoever approached her was a friend who knew all about her favorite things." The sophisticated manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. These weren't opportunistic criminals grabbing random children. They were psychological predators who had turned Maya's own innocence and joy into weapons against her. But Atlas disrupted their timeline, Sarah said, trying to find some hope in the darkness. Atlas saved Maya's life, Cooper confirmed. But more than that, he preserved the evidence that's going to help us shut down this entire network. If their plan had succeeded, Maya would have disappeared, and we never would have known about the surveillance operation or the other children being targeted. Atlas appeared in the doorway as if he had been listening to the conversation. He padded over to Sarah and sat beside her chair, his solid presence a reminder that sometimes the most sophisticated evil could be defeated by something as simple as an old dog's protective instincts. Maya followed a moment later, carrying Princess Bunny and looking for someone to listen to her latest stuffed animal adventure. The sight of her daughter's trusting smile, knowing how close they had come to losing her, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "Mommy, why are you sad?" Maya asked, climbing onto Sarah's lap with the unconscious confidence of a child who had never had reason to doubt her safety. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm just very, very grateful." Maya considered this seriously. Grateful for Atlas? Yes, grateful for Atlas. And grateful that you're safe and here with me. "Atlas is the best dog in the whole world," Maya declared, reaching over to pat his head. "Aren't you, Atlas?" Atlas accepted the praise with the dignity of a dog who understood that his job was far from over. As Maya chattered about her morning tea party plans, he maintained his alert posture, eyes constantly moving between the apartment's windows and doors, ready to protect the child who had no idea how much danger she had been in. But Sarah knew, and she also knew that until the people behind this network were caught, every moment of Maya's innocent happiness was a gift that could be taken away in an instant. Could you trust your instincts the way Atlas trusted his? Tell us about a time when intuition saved you, or someone you love. The call that changed everything came at 6:42 a.m. on Tuesday morning, jolting Sarah from the first real sleep she'd managed since the drone incident 3 days earlier. Agent Cooper's voice was tight with urgency when she answered her phone. "Sarah, we need to move now. Another child has gone missing, and we have reason to believe it's connected to the network that was targeting Maya." Sarah sat up in the unfamiliar bed of the federal safe house where she and Maya had been relocated, her heart immediately racing. What child? Where? 8-year-old Sophia Chen from Millbrook Heights, about 40 miles north of your neighborhood. She disappeared from her backyard yesterday evening while her parents were inside making dinner. But here's what makes this critical. We found evidence of the same surveillance equipment in the woods behind her house. The name hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. Millbrook Heights was where her sister Jennifer's best friend lived, where Maya had attended a birthday party just 2 months ago. The trafficking network wasn't just operating in her neighborhood, they were working across multiple communities, targeting children who fit their specific profile. Sarah, there's more. The analysis of the equipment we recovered from your yard shows GPS coordinates for 17 different locations across 3 states. We think we're looking at active surveillance sites for children who are either current targets or have already been taken. Maya stirred in the bed beside her, mumbling something about Princess Bunny needing breakfast. Atlas, who had been sleeping on the floor beside Maya's bed, immediately lifted his head, alert to the tension in Sarah's voice even through the quiet phone conversation. "What do you need from me?" Sarah asked, careful to keep her voice low. "We're launching coordinated raids on all 17 locations simultaneously in 6 hours. But one of the GPS coordinates corresponds to an abandoned farm complex about 12 miles from Millbrook Heights. We think that might be where they're holding Sophia and possibly other children." Sarah's blood ran cold. Other children? The server data from Webb's house showed references to 3 children who have gone missing from the target area over the past 4 months. If we're right about the farm location, this could be where they're being held before transport to buyers. The clinical language couldn't mask the horror of what Agent Cooper was describing. Children, some possibly as young as Maya, being held in captivity like inventory waiting to be shipped. Sarah looked at her daughter's sleeping face and felt a surge of gratitude so intense it was physically painful. "How can I help?" "We need Atlas." Sarah blinked, certain she had misheard. "What?" "Atlas was trained in search and rescue before he specialized in narcotics, correct? His service record shows extensive training in tracking and victim location." "Yes, but Agent Cooper, he's 8 years old. He's been retired for 3 years." "Sarah, Atlas detected a threat that our most sophisticated surveillance equipment missed. His instincts saved Maya's life. And right now, Those same instincts might be the key to saving Sophia and the other children. Sarah looked down at Atlas, who was now sitting upright, his intelligent eyes focused on her face as if he understood the conversation. His ears were perked forward in the alert position she remembered from their active duty days, when he would catch scents or sounds that meant they were close to finding what they were looking for. "What exactly are you asking?" The farm complex is over 200 acres with multiple buildings, underground storage areas, and heavily wooded sections. Our tactical teams can handle the raid, but if there are children hidden in concealed locations, Atlas might be able to find them faster than our equipment. Every minute counts in a situation like this. Maya rolled over in her sleep, automatically reaching for Atlas's familiar presence. Her small hand found his fur, and even in sleep, she smiled at the contact. The idea of taking him away from Maya, even temporarily, felt like removing her most important protection. "Agent Cooper, I understand what you're saying, but Atlas's first priority has to be Maya's safety. If something happened to him during the raid..." "Sarah, I have a daughter too. She's 7 years old, and every time I work a case like this, I think about how I'd feel if she was the one being held in some basement, waiting for someone to find her. Atlas might be Maya's protector, but right now, he might also be Sophia's only hope." The weight of the decision felt crushing. Sarah understood that other children needed saving, but the thought of Maya being without Atlas's protection, even for a few hours, terrified her. Her Maya's eyes fluttered open, immediately seeking Atlas's reassuring presence. "Good morning, Atlas. Did you have good dreams?" Atlas responded with the gentle tail wag he reserved specifically for Maya, but his attention remained partly focused on Sarah's phone conversation. Even after 3 years of retirement, his training still ran deep, and Sarah could see the working dog in him responding to the urgency in their voices. "Mommy, why are you talking so early?" Maya asked, rubbing her eyes. "Agent Cooper has some important police work to do, sweetheart. He might need Atlas's help for a little while today." Maya sat up immediately, her protective instincts as strong as her mother's. "But Atlas needs to stay with me. He keeps me safe." Sarah's heart broke at the innocent trust in her daughter's voice. Maya had no way of understanding that other children needed Atlas's help too, or that his unique abilities might mean the difference between life and death for kids she didn't even know. Agent Cooper's voice came through the phone speaker, gentle but urgent. "Maya, can you hear me?" "Yes, sir." "Maya, Atlas is a very special dog. He used to help police officers find people who were lost or in trouble. Right now, there's a little girl named Sophia who is lost and scared, and Atlas might be the only one who can help find her." Maya considered this with the serious expression she wore when processing important information. "Is Sophia the same age as me?" "She's a little older. She's 8, but she's probably very scared right now, and she needs someone like Atlas to help bring her home to her family." Sarah watched her daughter's face as she processed this information. Even at 5 years old, Maya understood that helping others was important, but she also understood that Atlas was her protector. "Atlas," Maya said seriously, looking directly into the dog's brown eyes, "do you want to help find Sophia?" As if he understood the question, Atlas stood and moved to the window, his nose testing the air, and his body language shifting into the alert, focused posture Sarah remembered from their most challenging cases. His tail was up, his ears forward, and every muscle seemed coiled for action. "I think he does want to help," Maya said quietly, "but who will keep me safe while he's gone?" Agent Cooper had been listening to the conversation. "Maya, if Atlas helps us today, you'll be staying in the safest place we have, with lots of police officers to protect you, and Atlas will come back to you as soon as his job is done." Sarah made the decision that would haunt her dreams for weeks afterward. "We'll do it, but I want constant communication about Atlas's safety, and I want him back the moment the operation is complete." "Understood. We'll have a transport here in 20 minutes. As Sarah hung up the phone, Maya crawled out of bed and wrapped her arms around Atlas's neck. "You have to be very careful, Atlas, and you have to come back to me, okay? Promise, you'll come back." Atlas leaned into Maya's embrace, his gentle nature evident in the way he remained perfectly still while she hugged him. But Sarah could see the working dog in him too, the part that had been trained to find people in desperate situations, responding to a call he hadn't heard in 3 years. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Agent Cooper arrived with a tactical transport vehicle and a team of specialists who treated Atlas with the respect due a veteran K-9 officer. They fitted him with a protective vest and communication equipment that would allow them to track his location and vital signs throughout the operation. Maya insisted on helping prepare Atlas for his mission, checking his vest straps and making sure his water bowl was properly secured in the transport vehicle. Her 5-year-old seriousness about the situation was both heartbreaking and inspiring. "Atlas, you find Sophia and bring her home," Maya said, giving him one final hug. "Then you come back to me, okay?" Sarah watched the transport vehicle disappear down the road, carrying her daughter's protector toward a mission that would determine whether other children lived or died. The federal safe house felt impossibly empty without Atlas's reassuring presence, and Maya seemed smaller and more vulnerable without her 4-legged guardian nearby. The waiting was agony. Agent Cooper had promised to maintain contact, but as the hours dragged by with only occasional updates, Sarah found herself pacing the safe house like a caged animal. Maya tried to maintain her normal routines, setting up tea parties for her stuffed animals, but even she seemed subdued without Atlas's watchful presence. At 2:15 p.m., Sarah's phone rang with the update she had been desperately waiting for. "Sarah, it's Cooper. We found her." "Sophia?" Atlas led us directly to a concealed basement entrance that our equipment had missed. Sophia was there, along with 2 other children who had been reported missing from other jurisdictions. "They're all alive, Sarah. Atlas saved 3 lives today." Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed with relief and pride. "Is he okay? Is Atlas okay?" "He's tired but unharmed. The team says he worked like a dog half his age." "Sarah, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like what Atlas did today. He didn't just find the children. He seemed to understand the urgency of the situation. He worked faster and more efficiently than K-9s with years more training and experience." Maya had been playing quietly nearby, but she looked up at the sound of Atlas's name. "Is Atlas coming home now?" Sarah smiled through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart. Atlas is coming home, and he helped save 3 children today. He's a hero, dog," Maya said matter-of-factly. "I always knew he was special." The transport vehicle returned to the safe house just as the sun was setting, and Maya ran to meet Atlas before he had even fully emerged from the vehicle. The reunion was everything Sarah had hoped for. Atlas's tail wagging so hard his entire body moved. Maya's delighted laughter as she was nearly knocked over by his enthusiastic greeting. But Sarah could see the exhaustion in Atlas's eyes, the deep tiredness that came from pushing an aging body to perform at levels it hadn't reached in years. He had given everything he had to save children he didn't know, driven by instincts and training that ran deeper than retirement. Agent Cooper joined them as Maya reacquainted herself with her protector. "Sarah, the operation was a complete success. We arrested 14 suspects across multiple states, and we recovered evidence that will shut down this trafficking network permanently. But more importantly, we rescued 6 children who are going home to their families tonight." 6 children? Atlas's work at the farm led us to additional locations. The information we gathered there allowed our other teams to locate children being held at different sites. Sarah, Maya's protector, didn't just save Sophia. He helped save 6 children and prevent dozens of others from being targeted. Sarah looked down at Maya, who was now lying on the floor beside Atlas, both of them exhausted from their day apart. "Maya, do you understand what Atlas did today?" "He found the lost children and brought them home," Maya said simply. "Just like I knew he would." That night, as Maya slept peacefully beside Atlas in their temporary safe house bed, Sarah received one more call from Agent Cooper. "Sarah, there's something else you should know. One of the children Atlas helped rescue today was a 6-year-old girl named Emma who had been missing for 3 months. Her parents had given up hope of ever seeing her again." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. They're together right now. Emma's been reunited with her family, and she's going to be okay. She's going to need time and therapy to heal from what she's been through. But she's alive, and she's home." Looking at Maya sleeping safely beside Atlas, Sarah understood that some stories had endings that were both heartbreaking and miraculous. Her daughter's protector had become 6 other families' miracle, and somehow that felt exactly right. But as she watched Atlas sleep, she noticed something that made her breath catch. A slight tremor in his hind legs, a subtle sign of the toll the day had taken on his aging body. What price are we willing to pay to save innocent lives? Share a moment when you witness true heroism in the comments. 3 weeks after the rescue operation, Sarah noticed Atlas struggling to get up from his favorite spot beside Maya's bed. The tremor in his hind legs had become more pronounced, and the veterinarian's diagnosis confirmed what Sarah had been dreading. The intense physical demands of the rescue mission had accelerated the arthritis that had been slowly developing in his aging joints. It's not uncommon in working dogs who've had demanding careers, Dr. Martinez explained gently as she examined Atlas in their temporary apartment. They had finally been cleared to return home, but Sarah wanted Atlas checked thoroughly before Maya could see how much he was struggling. The mission he completed was equivalent to what we'd normally expect from a dog half his age. His body gave everything it had. Sarah watched Atlas try to maintain his dignified posture despite the obvious discomfort, and her heart broke. How long does he have? With proper care and medication, possibly several more years. But, Sarah, you need to understand that Atlas isn't going to be the same protector he was before. His mobility is going to be limited, and there may be days when he can't even get up the stairs. That evening, as Sarah helped Atlas settle into his bed beside Maya's, her daughter noticed the difference immediately. "Mommy, why is Atlas walking funny?" Sarah had dreaded this conversation, but Maya deserved the truth. "Atlas worked very hard when he helped find Sophia and the other children, sweetheart. Sometimes when heroes work that hard, their bodies get very tired." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Is Atlas sick?" "He's not sick exactly, but his legs hurt now. Kind of like how your legs hurt when you run too much at the playground. Except for Atlas, the hurt doesn't go away when he rests." Maya crawled out of her bed and carefully positioned herself beside Atlas, being gentle with his sore joints in the way that children somehow instinctively understand. "Does it hurt a lot, Atlas?" Atlas responded by gently licking Maya's face, his tail managing a weak wag despite his discomfort. Even in pain, his primary concern remained his little girl's happiness. "Atlas saved those children, didn't he?" Maya asked, her small hand stroking his graying muzzle. "Yes, he did. He saved 6 children and helped make sure that bad people could never hurt other kids the way they wanted to hurt you." Maya was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the seriousness that had become characteristic of her since the drone incident. "So Atlas is hurt because he's a hero." "Yes, baby, that's exactly right." "Then I'm going to take care of him now, the same way he took care of me." And she did. Over the following days, Maya appointed herself Atlas's primary caregiver. She made sure his water bowl was always full, she helped Sarah give him his medication, and she spent hours simply sitting beside him, reading him stories and including him in her tea parties, even when he was too stiff to move from his bed. The transformation was remarkable. Maya, who had always been a joyful but somewhat self-centered 5-year-old, developed an empathy and sense of responsibility that amazed the adults around her. She seemed to understand that Atlas had given up his comfort to save other children, and she was determined to give him all the love and care she could in return. Agent Cooper visited them regularly. During those weeks, partly for follow-up on the case, but mostly to check on Atlas. On one particular afternoon, he found Maya and Atlas in the backyard. Maya had set up her tea party equipment on a blanket beside Atlas's bed, so he could participate without having to move. "Princess Bunny thinks you're the bravest dog in the world," Maya was telling Atlas seriously. "And Mr. Bear wants to give you his medal for being a hero, but I told him you already have lots of medals from when you were a police dog." Agent Cooper knelt beside them. "Maya, can I tell you something about Atlas?" "Yes, sir. The children Atlas helped save, they all know his name now. Their families know that without Atlas, those kids might never have come home. There's a little girl named Emma who draws pictures of Atlas every day and sends them to the police station." Maya's eyes widened. "Really?" Cooper pulled out his phone and showed Maya a photo of a crayon drawing. A large German shepherd with a cape, surrounded by smiling children. At the bottom, in careful 6-year-old handwriting, were the words, "Thank you, Atlas, for saving me." Emma drew this for Atlas? She did, and so did 5 other children. "Maya, your dog isn't just your hero. He's a hero to a lot of families." That night, as Sarah tucked Maya into bed, her daughter made a request that surprised her. "Mommy, can we invite Emma to our house? I want to meet the little girl Atlas saved." That's a very sweet thought, sweetheart. But Emma lives far away, and she's probably still recovering from what happened to her. But maybe if she met Atlas, she wouldn't be scared anymore. Maybe she would feel safer, like I do when Atlas is with me. The innocence and empathy in Maya's suggestion moved Sarah to tears. Her daughter, who had been the original target of the trafficking network, was thinking about how to help another victim heal. It was a level of emotional maturity that most adults struggled to achieve. 2 days later, Agent Cooper called with news that would bring the story full circle in a way none of them could have anticipated. "Sarah, I have an unusual request. Emma's family has been in touch with us, and they'd like to meet Atlas and Maya if you're comfortable with it. Emma has been having nightmares and anxiety attacks, but she talks about Atlas constantly. Her therapist thinks meeting him might help with her recovery." Sarah looked at Maya, who was gently brushing Atlas's coat while he dozed in the afternoon sun. "What do you think, sweetheart? Would you like to meet Emma?" "Yes, and Atlas would like to meet her too. I know he would." The meeting was arranged for the following weekend, with careful coordination between the FBI's Victim Services team and Emma's therapists. When the day arrived, Sarah wasn't sure what to expect, but she certainly wasn't prepared for the profound emotional impact of watching two children, one who had narrowly escaped trafficking, one who had survived it, connect over. Their shared bond with an aging hero dog. Emma was smaller than Sarah had expected, with dark hair and eyes that held too much knowledge for a 6-year-old. She approached Atlas tentatively, as if she couldn't quite believe he was real. "Are you really the dog who found me?" she whispered. Atlas, despite his stiff joints and constant discomfort, seemed to understand the importance of the moment. He lifted his head and gently nuzzled Emma's hand, his tail attempting its old enthusiastic wag. "He remembers you," Maya said confidently. "Atlas remembers everyone he saves." Emma's parents watched with tears in their eyes as their daughter, who had barely spoken above a whisper since her rescue, began to tell Atlas about her nightmares and how thinking about him made her feel safer. "The bad people said nobody would come looking for me," Emma told Atlas quietly. "But you did come looking. You found me when I was scared and dark and didn't think anyone remembered my name." Atlas responded by carefully positioning himself so Emma could lean against his warm fur, providing the same comfort he had given Maya countless times. Despite his own pain, he remained perfectly still, allowing Emma to take whatever piece she could from his presence. Maya, watching this interaction with the wisdom that trauma sometimes brings to children, made a decision that surprised all the adults present. "Emma, would you like to have tea with me and Atlas? Princess Bunny has been wanting to meet you." For the next hour, Sarah watched her daughter share her most precious possessions. Her stuffed animals, her tea set, her stories about Atlas's heroism, with a little girl who needed to remember that the world contained kindness as well as cruelty. Atlas, despite visible exhaustion, participated in the tea party with the same dignity he had brought to police work. He accepted imaginary tea from Emma's shaking hands and listened to Maya's explanation of each stuffed animal's personality as if it were a tactical briefing. When it was time for Emma's family to leave, the little girl threw her arms around Atlas's neck and whispered something that only he could hear. Then she turned to Maya with an expression of gratitude that was heartbreaking in its intensity. "Thank you for sharing Atlas with me," Emma said. "I'm going to be brave like him." "You already are brave," Maya replied. "Atlas just helped you remember." After Emma's family left, Sarah found herself crying for reasons she couldn't fully articulate. She had watched her daughter, who had been targeted by the same evil that had traumatized Emma, offer comfort and hope to another victim. She had seen Atlas, despite his own declining health, provide healing to a child he had risked his life to save. That night, as Atlas settled carefully into his bed beside Maya, Sarah noticed that his breathing seemed more labored than usual. She made a mental note to call Dr. Martinez in the morning, but Maya's voice interrupted her worried thoughts. "Mommy, Atlas did something really important today, didn't he?" "Yes, sweetheart. He helped Emma feel safer. And when Emma grows up, she'll remember that Atlas saved her. And maybe she'll help save other people too." Sarah looked at her daughter with amazement. "What makes you think that?" "Because that's what heroes do. They save people, and then those people become heroes too, and they save other people. It's like a circle that never stops." As Sarah kissed Maya goodnight and settled Atlas's blanket around his aging body, She realized her 5-year-old daughter had articulated something profound about the nature of heroism and healing. Atlas hadn't just saved Emma's life, he had given her a model for what courage looked like, what protection felt like, what it meant to be worth saving. The next morning brought the call Sarah had been dreading. Dr. Martinez's voice was gentle but serious. "Sarah, Atlas's condition is deteriorating faster than we hoped. The medication isn't managing his pain as effectively as it should be, and his heart is showing signs of strain." What does that mean? It means we need to start thinking about his quality of life. Atlas is a fighter, but he's also in significant discomfort. At some point, we'll need to make some difficult decisions about what's best for him. Sarah looked at Atlas, who was struggling to get up from his bed to follow Maya to the kitchen for breakfast. His determination to continue protecting her, even when movement caused him obvious pain, was both inspiring and heartbreaking. But as she watched Maya carefully help Atlas to his feet, supporting his weight and encouraging him with gentle words, Sarah realized that the circle her daughter had described was already turning. Maya had been saved by Atlas's heroism, and now she was learning to be a hero herself. Not through dramatic rescues, but through daily acts of compassion and care. Atlas had taught her that heroism wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting with love, despite fear, about protecting others even when it cost you everything you had. Later that day, Agent Cooper brought news that provided the final chapter to their incredible story. "Sarah, I wanted you to know that the trafficking network has been completely dismantled. The evidence Atlas helped us gather led to arrests in 12 states and 3 countries. We estimate that his actions prevented the trafficking of over 50 children." 50 children? The network had been operating for years, targeting families just like yours. But more importantly, the children Atlas directly rescued are all doing well. Emma is back in school, and her nightmares have decreased significantly since meeting him. The other children are also making progress in their recovery. Sarah felt a deep sense of completion, as if Atlas's story had reached its natural conclusion. He had been a working dog, then a protector, then a hero, and finally a healer. Each role had taken something from him, but each had also given meaning to his life in ways that most beings never experience. That evening, as the sun set over their neighborhood, the same backyard where a falling drone had changed their lives forever, Sarah sat beside Atlas, while Maya played with her stuffed animals nearby. The playhouse had been rebuilt with reinforced glass and security features, but Maya rarely used it now. She preferred to play close to Atlas, where she could include him in her games and monitor his comfort. "You know, Atlas," Sarah said quietly, stroking his graying fur, "I always thought your job was to protect Maya, but I think maybe your real job was to teach her how to protect others." Atlas lifted his head to look at her, his brown eyes still intelligent and aware despite his physical decline. In those eyes, Sarah saw acceptance, peace, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. As the stars appeared overhead, Maya curled up beside Atlas on his outdoor bed, her small body providing warmth for his aching joints. "Tell me the story again, Atlas," she whispered. "Tell me about how you saved all the children." And in the gentle evening breeze, as Sarah watched her daughter and their hero dog rest together, she could almost hear Atlas's response, not in words, but in the steady rhythm of his breathing, the protective way he positioned himself even in sleep, and the enduring love that had driven him to give everything he had to keep innocence safe in a dangerous world. 6 months later, when Atlas finally closed his eyes for the last time, surrounded by the family he had protected and the memories of the children he had saved, Maya was ready with her own story to tell, about a hero dog who had taught her that love was the strongest force in the universe, and that sometimes the greatest gift you could give was not your strength, but your willingness to share it with those who needed it most. The circle continued to turn, just as she had predicted, carrying Atlas's legacy forward into a future he had helped make safe. What legacy would you want to leave behind? Like, share, comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe to hear more incredible stories of ordinary heroes doing extraordinary things.